Hey, what's up, guys? I am Caleb Giddings,
And I am Keith, and we
and
have no
we have
Jack.
yeah, and we have no Jack today, which is sad. But we do have sponsors.
Ta-da!
All right, so anyway, let's get down to business because yesterday the state of California doxed everybody with a concealed carry permit. Like that's not an exaggeration or
Nope,
anything
they
like that. Keith, why don't you tell
they
them
they
all?
pulled the ultimate. Oh,
Yeah,
there. Oh.
yeah, it was bad.
Hey, all those privacy laws we have, yeah, violate them.
Yeah, forget that. So to give you guys a little
Did
background.
you read this morning the expanded extent to what they found? Because
No.
I knew yesterday. I'll break it down then. I knew yesterday that every active licensee had been leaked. Anybody with a concealed carry permit, your info was publicly facing, and leak is such a terrible word for this. This wasn't linked. This wasn't leaked like, hey, somebody found a way to get in. This was literally just the website went on and you could search and find this
Yeah,
stuff. Like
so
the
let's
search
explain
bar.
before we get too deep into this. Let's explain exactly what happened. So the California
Yep, go
Department
for
of
it.
Justice launched this new website yesterday, and it's called the Firearms Dashboard Portal. And the idea was it was supposed to let the public have access to information about firearms crimes, number of concealed carry licensees in their neighborhood or whatever, things like that, right? It's a gross comparison, but imagine it as sort of like a sex offender registry website for gun owners. But what
Not
happened was,
not quite like that in the sense that the public facing data was supposed to be very, very limited and more of a for your information
yeah,
base, whereas the rear facing website was very law enforcement oriented.
right. So what happened
And what
was
happened?
the rear facing website went public. So for a time yesterday, you could go on to the Firearms Dashboard portal and look up the home addresses of people with concealed carry permits, like judges and police officer and reserve police officers, and people who got carry permits because they had to get a restraining order against their ex. All of that out in
You
the
could also
open.
look up the restraining orders themselves, who they
Oh yeah,
were
I forgot. You
against,
could
who they
also
were
look
for.
up the restraining orders. You could look up who had registered assault weapons, which we're using that assault weapon in the term that it is used in California state law. It's a thing that you have to register. All of
Mhm.
that published on the internet. You could find it. And that was kind of the extent of what I knew yesterday, but apparently it's worse.
It is worse because not only was all of that information public facing, you could search it, you could download the whole thing and see all the active licenses and the assault weapons and all that. They also have found that the previous 10 years, so from 2021 all the way back to 2011, if you applied for a permit and you were denied, or it was accepted and then later expired, all that info's out there too.
Oh, so the addresses of people who just applied for concealed carry permits.
Applied and were denied, whether we personally agreed with the reason or not. But if you applied and were denied because you didn't show just cause, so if you were like, hey, my ex is trying to murder me, and California was like, but are they really, and denied your permit, now your address, your new address, presumably that the one that you want to keep hidden from the crazy ex who's trying to kill you, that's public. That was in the public space.
I don't see any possible reason why that could be a bad thing. And
No.
I it's shocking because I remember like this stuff like this has happened before, but usually not one on this scale and not by a state agency. Many years ago, there was a newspaper that sent in a FOIA request and got like addresses of concealed carry permit holders in Tennessee and created a database, and they got sued and lost, and that database got destroyed. Tennessee changed their laws to make that information protected. So
State of Michigan changed their laws because it happened in New York as well. The Journal
mhm.
News in New York did it for, I believe it was a county. They didn't do it for the whole state. They got the FOIA for a county, and then they built an interactive map.
Yeah.
So like Google Maps, when you say, hey, restaurants near me, and it posts up, all right, there's the McDonald's, there's the Coney Island, they did that, but for all the people who owned guns
Yeah,
in
because
that
gun
county.
registration is never going to be weaponized and used against gun owners.
No,
That's
gun registration is only for safe and wholesome purposes. It
yeah,
can never be weaponized.
right. Could you imagine what would happen if they if like the NFA got leaked, right? Like if the
Yeah.
database of all of the registered NFA items got leaked and somebody put a heat map up of, where the most NFA items are registered. First off, it did, for the record universe, that was not a suggestion.
Please
That's not
don't.
that's not like
Although the confirmation of ATF incompetence would be hilarious, it would also be tragic because
we don't
that's a lot of info we don't need out there.
we don't want that happening. That doesn't need to happen. But
Find wood, knock on it.
Yeah, well, hang on, I got my desk. We're good. All right.
Found it.
So interestingly, there's another wrinkle to this story, is that, and I am not a conspiratorially minded person. I often, I 100% believe that incompetence is usually the culprit and not conspiracies. And that's
I too subscribe to Occam's razor very heavily. It's usually the simplest, and therefore the dumbest reason the thing happened.
And that's probably the case here. However, my skeptical hippo eye is out a little bit because it's weird how the day after the Attorney General of California sends out a memo to all of the counties, being all of the sheriff's departments and stuff that, issue permits, saying that the just cause requirement in the permit is now no longer constitutional. And then the day after that, they dox everybody with a carry permit.
As if perhaps discouraging people from going and getting carry permits now that you no longer have to satisfy some arbitrary rule of the state of California who doesn't think you should own a gun, period. But they can't come out and say that.
Yeah,
that pings really hard. Like, I expect the actual answer is incompetence, but I only suspect, and there's part of me that's like,
yeah,
that do be a coincidence.
And it's one of those coincidences that I'm sure it is actually just a coincidence, but it's just the timing is really like, it's one of the first conspiracy theory. Let's just say it like this. It's one of the first conspiracy theories where I'm 100% willing to entertain it, because given the current political environment around guns, post the New York State Rifle Pistol Association decision, I don't really have to stretch my imagine to think that a disgruntled-ish state employee was like, them gun owners, and like hit the button that said publish law enforcement only data, because it's like, and in my imagination, it's like a big red button, right, that says do not push. This will dox, hundreds of thousands of law-abiding gun owners.
This will violate all the protected information. Yeah. Do not push.
You're going to publish Samuel Jackson's home address on the internet because he's got a carry permit, which that I'm not like doxing Samuel Jackson here. That's like been an open secret for ages, is that he has a carry permit, or at least he used to. So maybe he got his thing published.
Probably still does. I assume most of the Hollywood bodyguard types, as well as a lot of people who live in California who have that level of money, do in fact have carry permits and are quietly pro 2A enough in their own protection that like that's a thing. I assume most of the people who are relatively quiet on the issue of guns in Hollywood probably are like, I am, but I can't say it because I would like to keep working.
Yeah, I'd like to keep my job. Thank you very much. Speaking of, see, this is why, it is interesting, because for a long time in California, the kind of the cool thing for your security detail to have was to go get a badge from one of the badge mills in like New Mexico and Arizona, which if you guys don't know about badge mills, that is a whole amazing wiki hole that you could crawl yourself into. And you might read some names in some of those articles that if you're in the firearms industry are familiar to you. But the whole idea behind a badge mill was there were, small like rural sheriff's offices in BFE, and they would have, these insanely large numbers of reserve officers like that are volunteers, and they come in like once a year to do, blah, blah, blah with the blah, blah, blah. But it's like a department's actual authorized strength is like 3 dudes. And then they've got 75 reserve officers. And you're like,
And
yeah,
there are a lot of names on those registers, and it doesn't just it's popular in the BFE areas in like California or New York or places that are highly restrictive except for law enforcement, but it happens in other law enforcement jurisdictions in more permissible states too. I know a couple of sheriff's departments that have some fairly high profile names on their reserve dockets, and you go, I wonder why that is. But I do, in those particular instances, and I won't say who, but in those particular instances, I do know that those people do actually show up and work their required week or required 2 weeks and do their time, which is kind of cool.
And so for the record, there's definitely a difference between, and I should clear this up because someone's going to get mad at me and send me a mean email. There was one outfit that was absolutely a badge mill. They would hand out badges for political donations. They would hand out badges to famous people, and that was not a cool thing. There are plenty of departments that utilize a reserve program, a reserve deputy or a reserve officer program to assist with their manning the same way that the military uses the reserves to assist with their manning. And those reserve officers show up, they do the work, they train, and, do they enjoy the benefits of, maybe having access to LEOSA or stuff like that? Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. And I am not being, I want to be very clear because I enjoy the benefits of LEOSA through the Air Force Reserve. So it would be extremely hypocritical of me to be critical of organizations that are utilizing the reserve program correctly just because somebody, like Shaq wants to get a badge.
Somebody gets a benefit because they happen to be both famous another way, but also in this program, which anybody could be and qualify for.
Shaq is a reserve deputy, or at least he was at one point. And according to all reports, Shaquille O'Neal showed up, did his job, worked hard, and was generally speaking, a good cop. So I'm totally fine with that. I want to be really, really.
I still want to see Shaq rolling out of a classic Crown Vic and just.
How would he fit in it? Like Crown Vics are big, but Shaq is big, so I don't know how that would work.
Crown Vic is spacious for we normally proportioned folk.
Yeah.
That is not Shaq.
No, Shaq is not normally proportioned. So back to the whole California thing, this is interesting for a number of reasons. Obviously, it's interesting because the timing is so highly suspect, right? Like, and again, not conspiratorially minded. However, this one does make the hair on the back of my neck stand up. And
this couldn't be timed better to look like a reprisal.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. This couldn't be timed better to look like someone in this, I won't say the state of California, but someone in the state of California's government being like, well, screw you guys. I'm taking my ball and going home. I don't want to play with you anymore.
Right. If you are intentionally trying to dox gun owners and concealed carry permit applicants in the hopes of discouraging people from applying for concealed carry permits because you now have to issue them, how would it look any different? It wouldn't. And that's why, again, my skeptical hippo eye or my, cop hair or whatever you want to call it is standing up. And I'm just like, the other reason I think this is interesting is, isn't California like the tech hub of America?
Oh, I could not be happier in my very like, you done goofed and you've earned this because of how much, I'm a firm believer in positive and negative karma. So if you
Mhm.
generally do good things and positive things in the world, you will probably have good and positive things happen to you. And this just tickles me to no end that the state that hosts Silicon Valley and all of the good tech things that are allegedly at the cutting edge in that state, the state of California could not properly turn on a website.
Yeah. And I mean, not just like not
And
properly.
not a particularly complex website. We have had this portal type system for decades. This is not a new format.
Yeah.
It might be built on fairly newer software, but how this website runs is like the most basic template.
Yeah. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad, and it's embarrassingly bad because, again, you would think the state of California would be able to turn on a website again, and now we can, entertain the argument of what if they turned on the website exactly the way the website was intended to function, and this was the plan all along, which, again, this one's tough because I'm like, this is really bad.
This
And
is
it's
incredibly bad. And it's one of those things that a normal web dev team would absolutely test on the dev site is the fact like, okay, this is limited information. This is public information. Let me make sure by emulating a public domain IP, whether I can find the limited information. Nope, cool. Let me test that for the various common users. Nope, can't access it. Cool. My filter for a logged in, portal user having access to the domain versus public facing. I'm not a logged in portal user. So logged in portal would be, California DOJ personnel, and non-logged in would be Joe Public just going to the website. Like that should be a very easy differentiation. It'd be like anybody being able to use literally anybody else's Amazon account just by searching it.
yeah. Well,
Like it's that level of simple.
see, and this is the problem. The more that we talk about this, the more I'm like, it would be almost impossible to do this wrong, right? Like
I never put a bottom marker on any government funded development. You know
fair.
what .mil websites look like.
Yeah, that's fair. In a race to the bottom, it's really easy to, well, in a race to the bottom, it's hard to beat the government.
And that's really the final thing in the Occam's razor that has me thinking this is probably still incompetence and not deliberate. And my guess is if California finds that this was deliberate, they'll hang whatever peon it was out to dry in a minute because they don't want to be accused of violating privacy.
Right.
Like they could probably give two shits about guns and protecting gun owners, but that's a bad look right now with the Supreme Court having just ruled the way they were. So if they can absolutely shove someone under the bus for it, especially if it was deliberate, they're going to, and they're going to very publicly to try and gain back some of those we're actually competent points. Totally, guys, it wasn't our fault, even though it probably was.
Yeah. I mean, and so, okay, so to put a bow on this, as we just said, in a race to the bottom, it's hard to beat the government because if you've ever been on MyPay, for example, which is the site that I use to see how badly the government has screwed up my paycheck, at any given month, the government
MyPay is awful.
I'm
glad I don't have to use it anymore.
Hold on, you know what? Hang on. MyPay objectively is a bad website. MyPay objectively is one of the best functioning government websites that I have to use. So that is like, that's again, that is why I don't believe with my whole chest that this was intentional.
Yeah, because there is a bar for government incompetence, and goddamn is it low. So this is absolutely within the realm of things the government could 100% screw up in a natural way.
The bar for government incompetence is so low an earthworm couldn't limbo under it. right?
not.
Like you need a
So-
you need an electromagnet, one of those super microscope things that can see gaps, that are the width of an atom. That's the bar. That's how low it is. All right.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't think that this is intentional, but for the first time in, of all of the crazy conspiracy theories that we've heard since COVID, this is the first one where I'm like, I'm going to entertain this one. I'm not going to
Yeah.
rule it
This
out.
this one can stick around as foreseeable. We
Yeah.
could plausible.
Plausible. Yeah. What is it with Mythbusters? Confirmed, plausible, and busted.
Yeah.
So this one, plausible. Like definitely not
This could
busted.
have absolutely been California throwing a temper tantrum.
Yeah. I
I
would
believe
love.
it was California being terrible at their jobs, but it could have been California throwing a temper tantrum.
I would love it if in like the next 2 days the Cali DOJ releases a statement being like, turns out this was the action of like a lone wolf employee who blah 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 blah. That person's been fired. Because then, one, that would confirm that it was intentional. And well, and right now they're looking for somebody to throw under the bus. They're like,
oh, right now, if they can in a good manner hang somebody out to dry on this, they're absolutely going to
for
do
sure.
that. Because otherwise it's just California DOJ and good old Bontas DOJ that's just like, yeah, you suck at your job this much.
Oh God, they suck so bad at their jobs. All right, guys. So to kind of put a bow on this episode, we don't think it was intentional, but it might have been. That's kind of where we're at on this.
We don't dismiss the fact that it was intentional.
And the other thing about this,
don't dismiss that possibility. Well, not fact. We don't dismiss the possibility that it was intentional, although we do not believe that most likely.
So, and I think the thing that I kind of want to end on is, if you happen to be a person who is not super pro gun and you've made it to the end of this episode, first off, how did you find us? Why are you listening?
Thank you for listening. But
yeah, thank you for listening.
How did you get in here?
But
we're curious.
What I want to really stamp with this episode is things like this are why gun owners by and large are so opposed to registration. And I know in this case it was, CCW permits, but also it was assault weapons registrations and things like that. And you saw it happen with registrations in New York after Newton, when that newspaper got a hold of that. And it's not that we're opposed to the idea of like,
we're not against rules, guys. We're not against
rules
forever, everywhere. But when you have a gun owner who is suspicious of the efficacy or how well government can do this thing, I want you to remember this.
Yeah.
I want you to remember that when you are saying, we need this thing, we need a registration and you need insurance and you need all this stuff so the government can make us safer. I want you to remember that California couldn't turn on a website without leaking sensitive information to the world that people absolutely have the right to expect remains private. So why should we have confidence in this?
And that is kind of the problem. Like, me as a gun owner, I'm opposed to registration. Look, the government knows I have guns. I have NFA items, so they know. So I am in fact a registered gun owner because I have NFA stuff. What I worry about isn't the government coming to my door to take my guns. What I worry about is my address getting posted on Reddit and crackheads kicking my door down at 2 a.m. because I don't really want to get into a gunfight in my hallway. And that's
not on the list of 5 top vacation items to complete for summer 2022 is crackhead at 2 a.m. the whole way.
The hardest it passes. And so stuff like this for gun owners, it resonates because we see the government not being able to properly safeguard the most basic personal identifiably information that's out there, right? Like, can you imagine how bad it would be if the DMV just leaked everybody's driver's license? Same idea.
Yeah,
same idea.
DMV is like, here's where everybody is at. Have a grudge against literally anybody? I can tell you where they're at. We're the DMV. We're here to help.
Yeah, same idea, guys. That's why we don't like this stuff. It's not that we're opposed to rules or things like that. We're opposed to letting the government control our PII because the government has come. I mean, for Pete's sakes, the federal government couldn't protect the PII of people with security clearances.
Mhm.
So, and the guy was on that list too. That was freaking awesome. So, yeah, it's great. California sucks at doing their jobs. Shocked face. Let me show it to you. And
This is my shocked face.
yeah, and we'll be back next week with another episode, guys. Thanks for listening.